Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm John Tucker. Here are the stories we're following today.
John, we begin in France this morning. President Emmanuel Macron is remaining defiant that he will serve the remainder of his term. Macron appeared determined in a televised national address after Marine Le Pen's far-right party joined forces with a left-wing alliance to topple his government. Here's Macron speaking through an interpreter.
National Rally MPs chose to vote against the government with a text that contradicted their own platform and was an insult to their own voters. By doing so, they chose chaos, and that's the only project they share with the radical left.
French President Emmanuel Macron will meet with key politicians today. He says he will appoint a new prime minister in the coming days to replace Michel Barnier. He was ousted in a no-confidence vote earlier this week.
And one of the architects of that vote to oust Barnier, National Rally leader Marine Le Pen, spoke exclusively with Bloomberg News, discussing why Barnier was removed and how she plans to help narrow the deficit with a new prime minister.
Our red lines are we can't ask the French people to pay the bill for the mistakes of their leaders. That's what Mr. Barnier did. He massively increases taxes, he hits sick people, retired people, he hits everyone. And at the same time, once again, there's zero savings from the state. That's inadmissible.
National Rally leader Marine Le Pen speaking with Bloomberg there through an interpreter. France's budget deficit is expected to widen to more than 6% of the GDP this year, double what's allowed under the EU rules.
And John, we're also following the political turmoil that continues to unfold in South Korea. After declaring martial law earlier this week, then reversing that hours later, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has lost the support of a key ally. Han Dong-hoon is head of Yoon's ruling People Power Party. He's now calling for the president to be suspended from office quickly, telling Parliament it would be dangerous to allow Yoon to remain in office. Han cites credible evidence that Yoon ordered the arrest of key politicians on the night he declared martial law. This increases the chances of an impeachment vote, and it's set to take place over the next few days.
And Nathan, turning back to the U.S. and the latest on that fatal shooting of UnitedHealthcare boss Brian Thompson. Bloomberg's Lisa Mateo joining us live now in New York with that story. Lisa, good morning.
Good morning, John. Yeah, we're now getting a better idea of what the man wanted for the shooting of Thompson looks like. The NYPD, they released new photos that actually show his face, and police are hoping that a $10,000 reward to help identify him will speed up the investigation. Yeah, former NYPD Chief of Detectives Bob Boyce said that it's the right strategy.
The number one primary thing right now is identify him and then apprehend him. And the motive comes a little bit after that. So there's two pursuits here.
Now, for now, police continue their manhunt. On Wednesday, officials, they searched the HI New York City Youth Hostel. That's on Manhattan's Upper West Side. And sources say the suspect checked into the hostel using a fake New Jersey driver's license and had been there since November 30th. Now, meanwhile, police in Minneapolis, well, they're investigating fake bomb threats that were reported on Wednesday night at Thompson's home and another that was on a nearby street where his wife lives. Lisa Mateo, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Lisa, thank you. In Washington, D.C., President-elect Donald Trump has selected a couple of key appointees. He has named Georgia Senator David Perdue, the former senator, U.S. ambassador to China. Bloomberg's Stephen Engel says he expects the business executive turned politician to be a China hawk.
I don't think Beijing's going to get an easy dove coming in as the ambassador. It's an extremely difficult job, obviously, to be the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to China at this time of increased entity list and export controls and retaliatory export bans in key metals to the United States by China. There's so much pressure in this job. We'll have to see.
And Bloomberg's Stephen Engel says while he expects the U.S. to remain hawkish on China, Perdue does have experience dealing with Communist Party officials and has expressed a desire for cooperation with Beijing.
And Trump announced another notable appointee in his next administration. Venture capitalist David Sachs is going to serve as his artificial intelligence and crypto czar. Bloomberg's Annabelle Druller says it's a newly created position that underscores the president-elect's intent to boost two rapidly developing industries.
Crypto is very interesting because this is an area where the US has sort of been reluctant to, yes, they've got sort of the institutional base, and yes, they've got a lot of the innovation coming from there, but actually to regulate the space, they haven't really wanted to do that just yet. But now we've actually got a sense of just the priority that this is going to be taking.
Bloomberg's Annabelle Drillers adds that Sachs is expected to spearhead crypto industry deregulation and provide crypto advocates a direct line to the White House, as well as to guide policy for the administration in AI and cryptocurrency.
And Sachs' appointment comes as Bitcoin and other cryptos continue to rally after Trump's election. Bitcoin has seen a bit of a pullback after surpassing the $100,000 mark for the first time. Right now, Bitcoin's trading at close to $98,000. One of the reasons for the bullishness is the idea that the incoming Trump administration could create a national Bitcoin reserve. Not everyone supports that idea, including former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers.
Some of what is being said, this idea that we should have some kind of national Bitcoin reserve, is crazy. I understand why we need a national oil reserve. I understand why a century ago we accumulated gold. Why would the government choose to support, by accumulating a sterile inventory, a bunch of Bitcoin? There's no reason to do that other than to pander to generous special interest campaign contributors.
At the same time, former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers tells Bloomberg's Wall Street Week there are instances where crypto's been overregulated. He says it is important to support financial innovation.
And let's turn to the economy now, Nathan. We get the November jobs report, 8:30 Wall Street time. Traders expecting a rebound in non-farm payrolls compared to last month's print. Let's get the preview now from Bloomberg's Mike McKee.
Forecasts are for a big rebound in job creation as workers sidelined by October's strikes and hurricanes return to payrolls in November. There are estimates the change in payrolls could be as high as 300,000. But given the caveats, the Fed will look through the headline number, paying more attention to the unemployment rate, which isn't affected by those distortions. Unless it goes up by a lot, which is not forecast, central bankers will see a labor market largely in balance. They'll look at earnings to see if there's any inflation danger, but unless we have a big surprise, it's not likely the jobs report will change the Fed's December rate plans. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Mike, thanks. And finally, this job's going to take quite a bit longer. NASA is delaying its first moon landing in more than 50 years to 2027. Engineers at the agency have been racing to fix critical safety issues with hardware and are adjusting plans for future flights. NASA says it is also delaying a precursor crewed lunar flyby called Artemis 2 by 7 months. That won't happen now until April of 2026.
And that brings us to 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, John. Today, jury deliberations will continue for a fourth day for Daniel Penny. Still no verdict after 3 days of deliberations in the trial of the Marine veteran. Penny is charged with manslaughter in the New York City subway chokehold death of a homeless man, Jordan Neely. Penny, who has pleaded not guilty, could face up to 15 years in prison if convicted. Authorities in California have identified the man who shot kindergartners in this week's Palermo school shooting. Butte County Sheriff Corey Honey identified that man as 56-year-old Glenn Litton, saying he took an Uber to the school, met with an administrator, and as he was leaving, shot the two children.
He has a lengthy criminal history and history of mental health issues. His first prison sentence was in 1991 for theft. Several other convictions for various crimes to include theft, fraud, forgery in the 90s and early 2000s.
Sheriff Honey says the suspect died at the scene from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. Honey also says the two kindergartners who were shot, ages 5 and 6, are in critical but stable condition, with a long road to recovery ahead. California and Oregon are reeling from a major earthquake that struck off the coast of Ferndale in Northern California yesterday. The magnitude 7 quake sparked a tsunami warning and several aftershocks. Seismologist Dr. Lucy Jones.
I know it was a quite big earthquake. It happened somewhere in California only every once a decade or so. So it's not a common event, but it's something we expect to happen.
In the end, there was no major damage and no tsunami. Finally, the White House Christmas tree lighting ceremony took place last night.
3, 2, 1.
President Biden attended his final White House Christmas tree lighting as president.
May I wish for you and for the nation now and always, as we continue to seek the light of liberty and love, kindness and compassion, dignity and decency.
This year's tree is a 35-foot red spruce. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thank you. And time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, being brought to you by your Tri-State Audi dealer. For that, we bring in John Stashower.
Hey, John, the Detroit Lions never won or even played in the Super Bowl, but they are the favorites to win it this year. And why wouldn't they be? Lions haven't lost a game in 3 months. Hosted Green Bay, there were 4 second-half lead changes. The game was tied in the final seconds.
Jake Bates, rookie kicker. The approach, sweeps the leg, kick on the way. He's got it! The Lions win! It is a new franchise record. 11 straight victories for the Detroit Lions.
Westwood won the calls. The Lions beat the Packers 34-31. Jared Goff 32 of 41. 3 touchdowns. Lions coach Dan Campbell on what his message was after the game.
We'll never forget this game. And I think a lot of it is just that, what we've had to overcome, the hand we were dealt. And I just love the fact our guys don't make excuses, man. They just find a way. And everybody on this team believed we were going to win that game, and we were going to find a way, and we did it again.
They've been winning despite a ton of injuries. The Packers only lost twice the past 2 months, both losses to Detroit. Bill Belichick interviewed for the coaching job at the University of North Carolina, so the Tar Heels considering replacing 73-year-old Mac Brown with the 72-year-old Belichick. At the Garden, down 13 early on, but they pulled away from Charlotte with a 28-6 run in the second half. They beat the Hornets 125-101. All 5 Knicks starters scored at least 18 points. Karl Anthony Towns had 27 with 16 rebounds. Islanders lost to Seattle 5-2. Chicago Blackhawks, with the NHL's worst record, fired coach Luke Richardson. The A's will have a new pitcher when they begin play in Sacramento. They signed free agent Luis Severino, ex-Met, ex-Yankee. 3 years, $67 million. That's more money than the A's have ever given a player. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. John and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. French President Emmanuel Macron is set to meet with key politicians today as he vows to serve out the rest of his term into 2027 and form a new government. That's after his Prime Minister Michel Barnier fell to a no-confidence vote this week.
I will ask them to form a government for the general interest, representing every political force within the spectrum of parties destined to govern, and that they could join or at least agreed not to bring it down.
President Macron spoke through a translator in an address to his nation last night. Joining us from Paris this morning, once again, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe anchor Stephen Carroll. So, Stephen, Macron sounding defiant here, but he is still under a lot of political pressure, is he not? Good morning.
Yeah, he certainly is. Good morning, Nathan. Look, this is a moment for Emmanuel Macron that he essentially laid out his plan, but didn't give us that much new information. He said that he won't resign, so he's not worried about the polls saying the majority of French people do want him to resign, nor is he worried about the far left who are calling for him to resign, or Marine Le Pen, who says, it's really up to him, but, read between the lines, she wouldn't be too upset either if he decided to resign as well. So he's now focusing on what he's calling this government of national interest, and the meetings lined up underway now in the Élysée Palace this morning will include his own political family, the centre-right party that he's been working with over the past few months. And then he's also trying to tempt over the centre-left Socialist Party. They didn't sign up to his centrist coalition the last time around, but now they're hoping to tempt him. We've been hearing from the head of the Socialist Party this morning, who's been speaking on French radio, saying, we're open to negotiate, but we expect, in the words, were reciprocal concessions from the centre and centre-right if they're to do a deal, essentially, and go into government together. The interesting thing here is that even if he got the Socialist Party, although that would improve the numbers in Parliament, still doesn't give them a majority, so they're still going to have to keep an eye on what the far left and far right would do if a deal could be done. No sign of a deal yet. Emmanuel Macron says he will name a prime minister in the coming days.
What could concessions look like, Stephen, to the left, when we've seen so many concessions already to the far right?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is going to be about a balance between what you're going to spend public money on, because realistically, when we're talking about concessions, we're mostly focused on the budget. That seemed to be the most immediate need. Emmanuel Macron says he wants a budget passed in January, which will already be kind of a later than it should be, obviously, because it was meant to be passed before the end of the year. So we'll be looking out to see whether there'll be measures on tax, on spending in certain areas as well, and how much the discussion around the deficit comes into it as well, because the France's deficit is already double what it's supposed to be under EU rules. Michel Barnier, in the budget that has fallen, had laid out a plan to bring it down to EU rules by 2029. Essentially, you have to still obey EU rules, so the question of how much money there is to spend, very limited, but we'll be looking to see what individual measures that these parties might want. And I think the issues around cost of living, support for households, and taxation are going to be key to that.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm John Tucker.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.